Good afternoon and good evening, everyone joining us in our part two webinar on AI governance in MedTech, but it's really in life science. And I'll tell you why it's in life science, because we've got experts from both med device, actually from multiple life science, biotech, and pharma. And we're going to do a deep dive today on AI governance. But before I spoil that, I'm going to go back to the previous part one and just to kind of remind you what we talked about in the um, last webinar, just to kind of give you a background on what we talked about 2 weeks ago or more. Um, we discussed AI promises and challenges. We talked about efficiency, speed, bias, privacy, and risk. Um, we did kind of define what is AI governance. What are the key components for AI governance? It's people, cross-functional roles, AI ethics board, process, risk-based model, lifecycle, audit readiness, technology, explainability, tools, validation. Here are the benefits of really solidifying and really kind of complying with these components. You've got compliance assurance, trust and reputation, innovation at scales, and operational integrity. Finally, who owns AI governance? We talked about roles and responsibilities, and from a compliance and quality perspective, uh, IT and data science, executive leadership, culture, culture, culture. I love to focus on culture for many reasons, and then product teams. And then next step, we kind of uh, pointed folks to what GAM Guide is talking about, artificial intelligence, which was a recent guidance that was released by ISPE GAMP, and then of course aligns with the FDA, ISO, IEC 4200, and GAM 5, build stakeholders and regulators' confidence, enable safe, reputable AI deployment, and ensure transparency and traceability. So that literally just, I'm gonna walk through these three slides, and of course we're gonna include them in the email right after the thing. So I'm going to actually close this one and go back to my original today's um, um, presentation. So again, this is the quick recap. Briefly, we talked about it. And as always, I like to give our FIXA team, the FDA industry CSA team, who do not just work on FIXA or do not work on CSA, but also various topics. AI is one of them, equipment validation, laboratory systems. We have quite a few of use cases. So FIXA team is a community practice, worked on the draft guidance for the past 8 years until it got released as a draft. And now it's kind of on a pause, not on a hold, a pause until it gets to a final release. So again, lots of folks from various organizations have joined, and today we have a few of these folks on the panel, and I would love to welcome our panel. We have a standing panel, my good friend Paul Sumner and Jason Dow, Sarada. I would love for you guys to introduce yourself before we continue. So we'll start out with you, Paul. If you can please give a brief introduction.
Thanks, Khaled. Thank you for providing the opportunity to be here today. I am Paul Sumner. I'm probably the oldest one here on the panel today. Yeah. Um,
But you look
so,
like the youngest, so.
why, thanks, man. Um, I am a former program director at MDIC for those of you who know the Case for Quality program. For a few years, 3 years, I think. Prior to that, since I am so old, I will just say in excess of 40 something years in the med tech industry. What's germane to this panel discussion today is probably some of the work that I've done in artificial intelligence. One of the early adopters developing regulatory strategy for neural networks, detecting lung cancer nodules based on chest x-rays. And then subsequently to that, in a small company called Change Healthcare McKesson, developed regulatory strategies for radiology workflow and imaging AI applications. And what else have I done, Khaled? Probably in the 45 years, I spent 10 years in overall MedTech compliance as a compliance officer for 6 different businesses within the McKesson Corporation, subsequently Change Healthcare. And then I joined MDIC and did some wonderful work with that organization and engaging cultural discussions through workshops and a variety of quality summits that some of you may have attended. There it is in a nutshell. Mhm.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it, and thank you for joining us. Jason,
Thanks, Khaled. Hard to follow that introduction. Paul has an extensive amount of experience. Very lucky to have him on the panel. And again, thank you guys for allowing me to join. My name is Jason Dow. I have been in the pharma biotech industry for a little over 20 years. My primary focus has been within information technology and within quality assurance. I've bounced back and forth in roles as management within IT organizations, management within quality systems. Most recently, I was Senior Director of IT Quality at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, where I had responsibility for computer systems validation, IT quality, and for a period of time, data integrity. Looking forward to sharing my insights. We had an opportunity over the last probably 2 years, 3 years, to qualify a number of AI models for use in GMP use cases. So just looking forward to sharing my experience and my thoughts with the rest of the group.
awesome. Thank you for that last sentence. That's awesome because I'm sure a lot of folks are looking, how do I do it? How do I get it done? So thank you, sir. Sarada,
Thanks, Khaled, and thank you, Paul and Jason, for this opportunity to be a part of the panelist along with you. So I right now with Compliance Group as part of strategic consulting. Overall, 18 years of experience in computer system validation, regulatory compliance, held multiple transformations across cloud programs as a quality assurance lead. Have worked on new IT. Last 6-7 years has been at least I've worked on at least 2 use cases per the pharma value chain that includes right from discovery till the post-marketing surveillance, multiple AI use cases, multiple models qualified, many types of AIs across. So very happy to share my 2 cents here along with such an experienced group. And thanks, Khalid, for this.
my pleasure. Thank you for joining, and I'm super lucky to have these folks, friends of mine. I consider both Paul and Jason to really accept to attend. I know how busy you folks are, and I really appreciate you joining. Khaled Moussally here, Executive Vice President at Compliance Group. I've got over 30 years of experience. My last long run was with Baxter Healthcare, medical device, biotech, pharma. I did it all. Really, my focus was on IT quality, compliance, manufacturing, operation, and I'm still going. So this is about me. I'm the least important person here. I got the most important folks. What I want to do actually to kick it off a little bit here, um, we often hear about accountability in AI governance. How do you actually operationalize accountability when responsibility is spread across data scientist, clinician, and compliance team? Now, I know most of you would love to jump on that question, but I'm going to vote for the youngest gentleman, uh, uh, Paul, to really give me a little brief on your thoughts around that.
You're just a comedian, Khaled.
Hey, we can skip. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, accountability. That is it's a superb question. It's actually a very broad question, depending on the complexity of the AI and, of course, the intended use of the artificial intelligence algorithm, whether it's for internal quality processes or if it's embedded in a medical device. The accountability i will vary. Um, if I were to generalize, what does accountability really equate to? It it really centers around responsibility, right? So when I think in the compliance universe, typically what organizations do is they develop what's called a RACI matrix that identifies responsibility and based on consultancy and informative participants and owners, right? But there really is more to that universe in my mind of accountability. You have internal accountability to your stakeholders in the organization, but you also have external constituents, right? The users of your product or your AI tool, whatever the end result is. Patients, right? Um, they are users potentially, healthcare providers, regulators. So this whole spectrum of who do we account um, for having trustworthy AI products. Um, the stakeholders are just very large, right? It's
That
a
is very
complete
true.
yeah. So that's sort of my soapbox generalism today. I'll switch it over to either Shraddha or Jason and see what.
Sure. Whoever would like to chime in here, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%, Paul, right? The stakeholders, the people that we represent, right? Those key quality attributes that we want to have as our North Star, insanely important. The other thing that I would say more from a practical or a logistical standpoint is a lot of folks hear AI governance and they hear about these committees and they have a tendency to fall into the trap that the committee is accountable, right? And what I would say is that the committee has the authority, individuals on that committee are accountable. And I really like the point that Paul made is I think it starts with those roles and responsibilities. There are going to be different groups in your AI governance that are going to have different accountabilities, but the entire committee itself has the authority, right? So at the end of the day, when you're looking at a compliance or an ethics issue, you're going to want to predefine who has the decision-making authority, right? Generally, your legal organization, generally your compliance or ethics organizations, if they're different. When you're talking about GMP, products, or you're talking about med devices, generally you want to have QA defined in a role and a capacity. So from a practical standpoint, what I would encourage people to do is make sure you're going in with eyes wide open on who, right? Not the committee, but which individuals have accountability and decision-making authority when you get to a challenging issue. Generally, it's very hard to hold a committee accountable for an individual decision. So if you look at it as they have the authority to execute the vision, but the individuals that make up that committee are the ones that have the actual accountability for that particular piece.
Yeah, that's I mean, there is no really one single entity, you can't just always blame quality for it, or quality is accountable. I think this is a bit bigger uh, of a beast than than just a regular IT system or a software, computer system validation piece, right? So yes, so yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. Shavada, would you like to add anything on here?
Oh, sure. I think both Jason and Paul hit the right ones. So the RACI is the key, right? So when we look at the AI lifecycle stage, have a focus on accountability right from the beginning, right? When you define your use case, who defined this and what is the purpose this use case is serving? And when you're curating the data, who selected this, who annotated this, and who approved this data set? And when you go into your model selection, model deployment, who chose the right algorithm or who chose this LLM and who tuned it and who configured it. So when you ask the right questions at each and every life cycle stage, right from your identifying the use case, curating the data, selecting the model, validating the AI model, and also looking at who is doing the continuous improvement for it, how we are monitoring and doing the drift detection, how are we retraining, who approves the things for retraining purpose. So once we have that accountability focus clearly built in and embedded to our life cycle stage, then the accountability becomes very easy. And as it involves multiple cross-functional teams, that the RACI is the key for us to resolve this issue of accountability.
Awesome. I love it. Keyword is races. Beautiful. I want to get to the next question that hopefully it is somewhat related because we need something measurable, right? So ethical principle sounds great on paper. Now, and I know we talked about committee, but how do leaders move from aspirational ethics to measurable team behavior in actual practice? And I'm gonna go to Mr. Dow. Jason.
A difficult question for sure. And I would say, right, I think it's less about measurable KPIs, right? And I think it's more about the culture. So when someone says, how do we embed ethics in things that we're doing, right? One thing is to understand what that North Star of ethics is, right? Multiple components can make that up, right? Different organizations are going to have different priorities. In our field, right, I would imagine 99 out of 100 organizations are going to focus on patient safety, right? That's our number one ethical obligation: do no harm, make sure that we're helping our patients, right? And that's a great philosophical goal to have. Where it becomes a challenge is defining metrics to measure that. It's very, very difficult to do, and I encourage people not to boil it down into KPIs. Focus on the culture, focus on living that culture, focus on demonstrating that to the culture to people, and allow them to have a dialogue in a safe space where people are comfortable being able to bring up, hey, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't seem right, I have this concern, this challenge. At the end of the day, fostering that dialogue, fostering that culture is what's going to breed success. I've not run into a situation where I've successfully found the magic KPIs that say if we hit this, we're in an ethical, good area. It boils down to having that one-on-one dialogue with individuals, having that group dialogue with individuals, airing concerns in a healthy and cooperative way, and from management down, praising that when it occurs. Hey, thank you for being brave and bringing up that concern. Thank you for being brave and going against the status quo. Thank you for your collaboration. At the end of the day, it's going to make it a better product. But I fear if you don't have that culture, if it's be quiet, let the science speak, and don't say anything, folks are going to run into a challenge. So probably not the checkbox someone can look for. If I put this metric in place, this metric, I'm okay. It's not that easy, unfortunately, right? I think it is that dialogue, it is that group speak, it is that collaboration. And at the end of the day, if you're walking away cautiously optimistic, you probably hit the nail on the head. If you're walking away, this is a slam dunk, or you're walking away, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world, you probably didn't have that open dialogue the way you should have.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. If anyone would like to add, if not, I can move to the next section. Anything, Paul or Sarada?
Yeah, I do. So when I think of AI, most users think of AI tools or products as a black box. Um, Chat GPT, you answer a few questions and it spits out all these great answers, right? The user really doesn't know, hey, how did you derive this answer or solution? So when I think about ethics, it really boils down to transparency and trust, right? If you can build up trust in the use of your product, that gains greater adoption, thereby you build a trustworthy reputation um, from a user perspective, but also a tool or product that becomes um, more commonly used, right?
Yeah.
Without that, um, a company or an organization is not going to gain the traction in rolling out AI tools or products because number one, it's not transparent. You haven't engaged users in the development of the AI algorithm, and they're on skeptical on the solutions or results that this black box is actually providing. So um, to me, that really is the key of everything around the life cycle of AI is that trust component. Right?
That's awesome. That's a good segue to life cycle. And I know Sarada is passionate about this. I would love to zoom in on the AI life cycle itself. Where does governance actually fit? And how do we avoid just adding more bureaucracy? So I would like us for with this specific piece here to explore how governance is embedded at different life cycle stages. um, Life sciences company already have QMS and risk systems. How do you integrate ISO 40200, NIST, AI, RMF into those without governance fatigue? So, Sharada, I know this is near and dear to your heart. I would love for you to walk us through and and help us.
Oh, yes, sure, Khalid. Thanks for that. So, like we see the AI lifecycle management wheel that you see on the left, and then it is expanded to the right that includes all of the lifecycle phases in detail, right from planning, design lifecycle phases, the data collection, model building, the verification, validation, deployment, operations, and monitoring. So, throughout all of this, the governance is the crux that cuts across all of the phases of the AI lifecycle, right? And to your question, Khalid, so how do we make sure that we adopt these frameworks? So what we can do is, I can just go with few examples and then I'll give it to like Paul and Jason to add on to that. We need to
Perfect.
make sure our goal is to have a AI governance overlay, but not overhaul the entire engine, right? So we need to make sure that we use existing change control workflows that we have to govern our AI model versioning, use it for retraining purpose. Because what happens, or based on practical experiences, when we first do the model validation or we qualify the model for its intended use, we will make sure that we follow all the right steps. We will put it through till the deployment. And once we hit there, what exactly happens to this? All of this still needs to be managed in a controlled state, and it has to be going through a rigorous change control process if it is going to really have an impact on the patient safety and product quality. So that is where we can have existing change control flows. That is one option. Then we can embed the AI specific risk assessments that this frameworks provide. So ISO 42001 or the AI RMF framework, which talks about the risk governance, how do we manage, measure, monitor. All of this can be across the AI lifecycle that takes into account the business risk, the regulatory risk, the risk related to the design, the data, the algorithm or the model, what is the performance of it, and the technology that we are using, and also a third party risk if when we purchase these tools from third parties. So when we have the AI governance cut across all of the phases of the model through the govern, map, measure, and manage mechanism, I think we will be able to make sure that we don't overhaul it, but at the same time have an overlay on all of these activities.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Sharada. Jason, Paul, would you like to add anything on here?
Jason.
The only, yeah, the only thing that I would say it's more to the specific question of how do we avoid the governance fatigue. I think Sarada did a fantastic job explaining how to build in the life cycle. The only other words of encouragement that I'd add is make sure that you are defining and recognizing that your life cycle development is an inherently separate process from your AI governance, right? And what I mean by that is if you're reviewing 100% of the output that you're doing as part of your SDLC in your AI governance committee, you may not be looking at it in the right way, right? Think of your AI governance as broad use of the algorithms. How do we monitor the algorithms? How do we ensure we're representative across those algorithms? Whereas your development life cycle or your SDLC, for lack of a better term, is more about that technical engineering. So as long as you keep the end goal of those two things in mind, you'll not necessarily run into that governance fatigue because you're not repeating the same things over and over again. You're distilling the key points from the development life cycle to cover during the AI governance, and you're getting strategic direction around the appropriate use of those models and separating that from the technical development. That would be the only other thing that I would add to Sarada's excellent explanation.
Awesome. I just want to zoom in a little bit on the risk management perspective, right? So if governance has to be risk-based, right? How do you decide which stages of the AI lifecycle need the heaviest oversight or which one can be lighter, right? So I don't know if Paul would like to chime in here or Jason, because I know you're a risk kind of guy.
Yeah, so, Khaled, risk management is true to my heart. It's one of the major topics I've been talking about in the past couple of years with MDIC. So one thing, before I talk about that, the audience probably is looking at this chart and saying, wow, this is overwhelming. Look at all this stuff.
Do I have to do all of this?
Look at all these boxes. And so let me just say, this is not establishing an independent bureaucracy just because it's AI. All of these, if the vast majority of these blocks are no different if you have a mature and established product lifecycle management process within your organization. The only difference is that AI really injects some additional factors, environmental characteristics that you may not typically involve in your product development life cycle because they haven't appeared. AI is introducing some new factors that really need consideration and particular specific attention that you normally wouldn't apply. Um, Relative to risk management, I mean, if you're developing products, medical devices, risk management better be part of your process already.
Yeah.
So the thing about we talked about accountability earlier. Accountability really is about liability, right? Liability of an organization for AI to make the wrong decision, creating patient harm, right? So, for example, recent reports are showing roughly 260 plus adverse events reported in the MOD database relative to AI. So organizations, they really need to, number one, develop that risk appetite for your organization. And that will vary from organization to organization based on the complexity and the classification of risk of your product, the tool. Based on that, that level of risk that you identify, that will really motivate you to the areas that require critical attention versus those that you can treat a little. You don't ignore them, but they don't require that in-depth attention to risk mitigation or risk controls that a high risk process or a high risk element of your product would require, right? And if you look at some of the regulatory standards that are coming out, especially in the EU, risk classification is the number one go-to, right?
Yeah.
It's a requirement, and it's like anything else, right? Your appetite for risk. Do you want to be on the far right of the fulcrum and just ignore risk altogether, or do you want to be to the left and sort of mitigate the risk to your organizational appetite of how much you're willing to withstand? I mean, that's sort of the high level view that I can offer today.
Awesome. Thank you. Jason, Sarada, would you like to add anything to that specific question on risk-based and the stages of AI lifecycle and heaviest versus lightest?
Yeah, sure, Khaled. Maybe I'll add, and then Jason, you can just add on to that. So, as Paul mentioned, right, consuming the risk appetite, understanding what regulators' expectation for risk appetite is one of the key things. And the expectation is to have clear risk categories, have definitions around the accountability for decisions, and look at the residual risk tracking. What is the oversight of documentation around all of this? And then, from an AI standpoint, how we are doing an adaptive model monitoring, and how do we handle the explainability, the transparency, and the bias, all of that. So it is how we classify the risk and focus on which area the risk matters the most. So, for example, for a use case identification, the rigor will be the risk will be little less when we compare to actual deployments that we are doing into a validated environment, or a low risk chatbot automating a training reminder versus let's say we are using an adaptive or a Gen AI model for classifying an adverse events code into a compliant management system. So what we need to do is to focus on the risk where it matters the most. And that way, we will be having a balanced risk based system, which we can go ahead and use it for the entire AI quality ecosystem.
Thank you, Sarada. And really, that kind of a segue to this slide here about AI risk governance. And again, risk tolerance varies from one organization to another, from one quality organization to another. But I'd like to really talk about here a little bit more on um, kind of the real world challenges, right? In terms of people, process, and technology. Um, can you share just sort of a playbooks that you've actually um, exercised in your past life somewhere? Because remember, AI did not just start today; it's been there, right? So I would love to hear a little bit about like how do you make sure that you know that the governance theater trigger real intervention when AI drifts. So how do you again? It's really how do you account for such risk? What if AI go wild at you? How do you account for that risk? Making sure, keeping in mind the regulations, the guidance, um, mainly really the regulation. How do you comply with all of that? So I would love for Jason if you can jump in on this
Sure.
question here.
Yeah, what I mean, and I might be simplifying this, right? So forgive me, but we
No, this
we
is great.
we we as an industry sometimes like to think that new technology means we have to blaze new trails in everything that we do. And where I think I've been successful in the past with organizations is relating it back maybe to older technology, right? Where there isn't anything inherent about AI drift or, as you mentioned, Colin, what if the AI model, goes off the rails, right? Well, when you're struggling with something like that, what I encourage people to do is, what do we do for other areas or other technology, right? Because if you look at manufacturing equipment, there's a very real risk that over a period of time, manufacturing equipment is going to drift out of its validated state, right?
Sure.
And in my mind, that's from a concept perspective, that's no different than an AI model drifting. Now, the what, the why, the how, the effect, very, very different. Would totally agree with that. But I don't think we have to invent anything new. We have continuing qualification. We have periodic review. We have continuous monitoring. Like those are just fundamental elements of your quality system that you should extend to include AI. I don't know that you have to go back and build something from the ground up to accommodate AI. Right now, again, the framework that you use, the data that you're looking at, the signals that you're monitoring for, absolutely. But that would be the same if you're looking at process drift versus equipment drift versus people drift, right? So I would encourage folks when you're looking at some of these things, don't necessarily think you've got to reinvent the wheel. You likely already have a continuing qualification program. You likely already have a periodic review or a compliance monitoring program. Think about how that fits into that existing quality system, but make sure that you're looking at the data and the elements and the metrics that are critical for AI.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Jason. I think monitoring, you hit on the monitoring, it's key. I think organizations need to expect variation and drift and changes in their AI algorithm based on the dynamics, the rapidity of data that's becoming available that potentially could change the overall algorithm that you initially developed. So it really is incumbent on organizations to monitor, for example, audit periodically the results of the algorithm to ensure that's accounting for change. As an example, socioeconomic factors that there's a tool out there that, for example, uses electronic health records, right, to develop um, treatment regimens for patients, right, based on the data in electronic health records. Well, electronic health records aren't 100% accurate. So if you've based your data model on EHR data, number one, you potentially have flawed results if you haven't accounted for the variation. As an example, if you look at patient demographics, who goes back on prescribed, what types of patients go back for repeat visits with their healthcare provider versus patients that don't, whether it's affordability, whether it's distance, those demographic variables change over time. And if you're not accounting for that through routine monitoring, auditing of the data for changes, then you could be setting yourself up to a future failure in what the algorithm is prescribing or the results of the output have changed. I experienced this early on. I think I mentioned neural networks early in this panel discussion. We had a limited amount of chest x-rays that we used to train the algorithm. And this was a self-training based algorithm, hence neural networks. The issue there was because of the limited data pool, we were generating a lot of false negatives and false positives in detection of lung cancer. So as more data became available, that is chest x-rays, we were able to further refine and reduce the false positives and false negative rate to a more acceptable level. I know that's a real extreme example, but it's a true use case. Yeah.
So how do you really prevent, these things from
I mean, in general, right? From anytime, I mean, forget about AI, automation in general, right? Like, how do we prevent from from creating a false sense of security? Because I understand what Jason, you know, you mentioned. I don't want to simplify it, but again, is it really not? It's not complicated, um, eh, because again, we're dealing. Again, I'm a big ask the question.
We lost you, Khaled.
Yeah, we lost you, Khaled.
I'll let Jason answer. Go ahead, Jason. You want to start?
I'll do my best. I think at the end of the day, it's a bit simplistic, like I said in the beginning, to say add it to your quality system, right? I think that's the right answer, though, right? I don't think it's make up something different. But like anything else, you have to have the technical expertise, the business expertise, the patient safety expertise to pick up on the signals. And so, what I would encourage folks to do is instead of trying to design a new quality system or design new processes to monitor AI, really focus your time, money, and effort on building your people's qualifications to be able to understand the signal that your AI models are going to be telling you, right? That are going to be flashing up, right? You've learned this over years. And again, my experience is in pharma and biotech. So I apologize if this isn't as applicable to med device or med tech. But you have SMEs with the culmination of hundreds of years of experience who know how to pick that signal from the noise to see when a process is drifting. They're able to pick up that signal from the noise when equipment variability is sending up a signal. You need that same subject matter expertise in your AI model signals. And it's going to be difficult to do that because we don't have 40, 50, 60, 70 years, right, worth of experience in that area. So we have to be very cognizant of that kind of continuous learning, that continuous monitoring, that continuous qualification. But it's going to be very difficult to draw a line in the sand and say, this is what you're looking for. But I think if you do build that into the framework that you already have and you have that dedicated focus of how you can pick up the signal from the noise, that's where you're going to get the most value from that versus trying to come up with maybe more complicated or more convoluted or more targeted quality system frameworks that are dedicated to AI. Because
That's
I
right.
promise you, right, we see it now. 5 years from now, what we talk about around AI is going to be completely different than what we see AI 5 years from now. So your frameworks stand the test of time. It's your subject matter expertise that I genuinely believe is what has to evolve, if that makes sense.
No, that's
Right.
perfect. And if you think risk management in general, organizations that have a mature risk management process should be detecting signals and monitoring signals in any way, whether it's AI or other products. But I think the other factor here is ECRI published a report and said the biggest risk to patient safety right now, the number two wasn't the number one, is over reliance on AI. And I think that that is something Sarada mentioned earlier in that life cycle. Human involvement, human engagement, right? You can't just solely rely on AI to do everything for you. It requires human oversight and inner monitoring to make sure that the algorithm is doing what it's supposed to do and providing the right results. If you over rely on it without monitoring, you're setting yourself up to some critical liability issues.
Absolutely, Paul. And that is where this false sense comes, right? So the basic misconception is because we have all of these tools available, we can go ahead and have them as trustworthy by default. No, that is not the case, right? We need to understand that tools don't equal governance. They are enablers, but they are not substitutes for the human accountability factor. So that is one key thing that people should realize, because we use tools like SHAP, Lime for prediction, model cards, we have audit bots, we have all of that. It gives us an output, it gives us a visual, but how does it fit in reality? Unless and until those visuals don't mean much, unless and until it is interpreted by a qualified SME who is comparing the ground truth, who is documenting the results based on how that model is being built or like fine tuned or pre trained, all of that. So the solution is to have procedures to review them, understand, challenge, and contextualize these with the human in loop reviews at all critical checkpoints with decision gates where it validates the model explanations. And you mentioned automation, right, Khalid? So review the automated risk assessments or any task that is being automated, approve the retraining triggers, validate the logs that is it is auto generating. So if we do all of that, we can make sure that this false sense of security can be eliminated, and we really have the best output from the models, which is getting interpreted by the humans and documented in the way it is supposed to be presented.
Well said, Sarada.
Very well said. Can you guys hear me by the way now? Am I
Yeah.
okay?
We can. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Apologies. Okay. Am I
You're fine.
I'm still alive. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for responding to the question at least. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I think, Sharada, you're making a lot of people happy here that there's still a human in the loop, right? And I think that question comes back almost in every webinar and every conference. What's going to happen to my job with AI? Is it going to be eliminated? Well, guess what? With every tools, with every technology advancement, there are going to be some changes. You retool yourself and you get back on track. So I just wanted to address that. Cool. Any other thoughts here, or we can move on to the next topic? I'd like to move to the security and risk beyond compliance. In real world deployment, how do you decide which AI risk to mitigate, accept, or transfer, and who signs off on that decision? And I think that's, again, putting that human in the loop, right? But the reason why I'm focusing on risk, because in every occasion we have a conversation about risk. Yeah, but I don't know how we're gonna assess risk. This is gonna be really, really tough. Well, folks are having issues assessing risk for an LMS today, right? How are we gonna assess risk for AI tools that it's making, you know, greater stuff? So, Paul, um, again, you're the risk king here. How do you decide which AI risk to mitigate?
I don't know about being a risk king. Um, so it really boils down to, I think we said it earlier, uh, the amount of risk, the appetite of risk that an organization is willing to take. If you want to bet the farm, or as some would say, bet the company, um, on taking aggressive risk to patient safety, well, you are definitely betting the farm. I mean, clearly, if you classify the risks correctly, then if it's going to involve patient harm, obviously that is a critical risk you should not accept. You need to do everything to control the risk. Um, Other types of risks an organization can accept according to their process, and that it's not going to cause harm, it's not going to cause operational inefficiency, for example, legal liability. Um, then it's an order. There is no check the box answer. Let me just put it that way. It's risk appetite comes from the top down, the organizational risk. Some build in a higher level of risk than other organizations, right? So the issue really, I think, in summary, is you don't want to stifle innovation, clearly. And when you look at the smaller entrepreneurial and small MedTech companies out there today, innovation is that's their lifeline. They're rapidly moving to innovate and get the product out the door. They don't have the resources um, and the wherewithal to develop this committee of a cast of thousands, right, to govern AI. Um, so, in all practicality, that's where risk management really comes in, especially on that small company, because they need to decide, hey, what is the highest level of risk, and mitigate that, and then accordingly accept lower levels of risk and mitigate later on in the stage of that life cycle. Jason, I don't know if you have a different or contrary view, or maybe you like what I said. I don't know.
Well, I totally agree. I think maybe from a practical standpoint, my experience where I see folks tend to get in trouble is when they try to evaluate all different kinds of risks by the same people at the same time,
Right.
right? So what I would offer, to add on top of what you were saying, because I agree with you 100%, is when you're looking at risk, the risks that your AI governance team is looking at are going to be at a very different level than the risks of your software development team
Right.
are going to be looking at. And I've seen organizations in the past, and I've participated in organizations in the past where they tried to combine those two things. And you want to make sure that those two groups are having the conversation together. But if you take a step out of AI and you look at, say, supply chain as an example, the people who are assessing risk to supply chain decisions are going to inherently be different than the people who are assessing risk of a manufacturing process for success. They should be talking, they should be collaborating, but you have a different lens, a different company, compass that you're looking at with those two things. And so I encourage folks to do the same thing with AI is when you're looking at patient safety risk, right? That is less in the model development arena, in my opinion, and more in the AI governance arena.
Yeah.
Whereas the AI model development is looking at risks to the technical build out of the model, right? I have the adequate representation of data is at the AI governance level, right? My risk of data cleanliness is at the development lifecycle layer, if that makes sense. So make sure those teams are communicating because one is an input to the other. But I've found if you try to go in all in and you're going to look at every kind of risk, whether it be process risk or technical risk, people get lost in the details. They get lost in the mud. So I think if you're able to break that out and you say your AI governance is looking at the societal risk, the patient safety risk, the ethical risk, and your development teams are looking at the technical risks, and then they're sharing that information, I think that's where you're going to get the best value out of both.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think, in simplicity, a risk that a majority of organizations don't consider is number one, who owns the data? As we move to a cloud centric type of environment, all the data is up there in the cloud. A simple tool like taking this meeting and storing the meeting in the cloud and using AI to automatically take notes and develop the call to actions and generate that. What happens to the data that appears in the cloud, right? Since we were talking about security and data privacy, some of these cloud organizations, I won't mention who, that provide the note taking AI tools, once you put that sensitive data in their cloud platform, they can use that data for any third party that they would like, right? So that's just an easy example as you're developing a policy, a governance of AI for internal tools or external, the things that you really need to be considering and thinking about.
Absolutely. And Paul, Jason, completely agree. And that's where organizations need to realize that the AI risk acceptance is not just owned by a single team or a point of contact, right? It's a
Yep.
cross-functional responsibility across all of the groups who has to sit and decide what is our risk type. For this risk type, let's say if it's a high severity, am I going to accept, transfer, or mitigate? If it is a third party, am I going to accept, transfer, or mitigate? Do an exercise with that, with all of the stakeholders who are involved, and then take a decision of how we are going to go ahead and take this to the next level in terms of cascading it to the teams where they understand their respective risks of that particular department. Either it can be the manufacturing shop floor or the development team or the production support team who does the change management. They understand clearly that what is acceptable, what is transferable, and what is mitigatable. So these are the key things that we need to look.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarada. I know we're coming on time here, and we have not gotten any attendees' question. Is there any questions, Bhavna, that you see out there? Any questions from attendees?
No.
Okay, it sounds like we're either answering all the questions or no one understands what we're talking about. Just kidding.
Oh,
But
we're really good.
we're doing really well. Okay, great. I know we have 2 minutes left, and first of all, I want to thank you for joining me. And just last word an advice, just give a short advice to our attendees and to the industry in general. Paul, again, because you're the youngest gentleman here, I would like to go to you from just an advice to everyone.
Now, I would say, if you're not planning for governance of AI, you should be. The train has left the station, and this is a super speed train. Um, you're going to be put into a predicament by regulators and competitors very quickly. That if you aren't governing, you can't build a trustworthy application. Hence, you're going to lose to the competition. Regulators are going to force this on you, and then you're going to be playing catch up. So I would say get on board early. Start thinking about how you can navigate development of some sort of governance framework within your organizations before it's too late. The last thing I would say on that human element, um, one of the annexes, Khaled, keep me honest here, I think it's Annex 22, that is being drafted, stipulates human monitoring, human intervention in AI, whether it's a quality system tool, product, etc. So the audience needs to be aware of that if you're dealing in European markets or outside the United States markets.
Great, thank you. Jason?
Yeah, and I think Paul hit the nail on the head around trust, right? What I would offer from previous experiences in the few times that I've had to defend model qualification with the regulatory agencies, 90% of the discussion, 90% of the focus had nothing to do with the engineering or technical details of the model. 90% of that work, 90% of that conversation was telling the story to establish trust. How do we know the development methodology is robust? How do we know you're taking into account patient safety? How do we know you have the proper human involvement? So what I would encourage folks is, if your game plan to defend your model qualification, whichever process you're using, is to send in your technical experts, I'd highly caution you to revisit that thought process, because in the number of occasions where I've had to defend, the technical defense has been an afterthought, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way, or that the FDA or the regulatory agencies aren't interested in the engineering components of it. They absolutely are. But their barrier for entry is trust. And if you don't tell that story, if you don't tell your journey, if you don't show how you're putting the patient first, how you're putting the humans first, how you're putting the monitoring of that output, the greatest engineering details behind it is not going to save you. So just maybe some specific practical advice, but don't think going in with all the statistics, all of the calculus, all of the geometry and algebra that you're using with your model development is not going to save a conversation that doesn't start with the ethics, with the compliance, with the patient safety mindset first.
Completely agree. Yes,
Great
Jason.
advice.
And
Thank you.
yeah.
Go ahead, Sarada.
Yes, Khalid, just to summarize on what Paul and Jason was mentioning, right? Governance in AI is just not a compliance checkbox, right? It has to be our strongest lever for us to build the trust, reduce the risk, and accelerate and do it over a period of time. Okay, so what I would suggest is start small, but start it with a purpose of making sure that you're doing it and you're going to do it over a period of time. So that way we can make sure that it aligns, we are able to scale up step by step. We know that we can align with the existing QMS, we can identify the risk controls and make accountability visible to everyone so that our AI system remains transparent, fair, and reliable throughout its life cycle, from initiation to the decommission.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
think both of you are saying, and you've heard this 1,000 times, if it's not documented, it never happened. Document what you do. Traceability is key to developing trust.
Yeah. And to Jason's point, I mean, we've always learned back in the IT quality space, whenever you're talking to a regulatory agency, yeah, we were trying to save some money, or it's better this way just because we're not spending as much. So you don't put a price on quality, right? So quality folks really need to really understand what AI is about and what it's really doing to whatever system, equipment, etc. We have to, again, we have to retool ourselves. We have to learn. Great. Thank you all so much. I appreciate your time. And we will be sending the recording. I know we did not have tons of people, but we have the quality people. And really happy that we got this type of attendance. And thank you so much. And we'll see you again.
Thanks,
Thank
Khaled.
you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Sarada. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
thanks, Chase.